What cut through? What was the standout pivotal moment in that State of the Union? Because there were many topics, a lot of rhetoric, some of it hot. So what do you think cut through the voters?
Thank you, Manus. Thank you, Danny. Thank you for having me on this International Women's Day. Biden had two jobs last night. And if you're reflecting on it this morning, next day quarterbacking, his team and the president will be satisfied with the job that he did on these two fronts. The first was to convey convincingly his track record and then his agenda moving forward. And the second was to do so effectively without any gaffes. On the first, Biden talked about his vision for America, and that's really what cut through, talking about a range of big themes, everything from democracy under threat abroad and at home, to reproductive rights, to the economy and tax policy. And then he used the opportunity in front of what was surely more than 20, last year's was watched by 27 million viewers, to directly address this issue that's overhanging his campaign about his age. And he started it out, as you saw just now in the opening, by trying to make a joke of it, but also by then reframing it as something that is going to provide him with both wisdom and experience as he looks ahead. He also very subtly attempted to level the playing field by saying that his predecessor really is not that much older than him. But it's important to remember here that this issue will dog him. Polling is showing that Americans are concerned about his age.
Well, Lindsay, even if this does get a lot of viewers, I wonder if it's the right viewers, because there was a lot of criticism around Biden not doing the Super Bowl interview, because presumably that's something that gets a wider range of people. I mean, what type of people even watch the State of the Union? And is it, again, the right people that Biden needs to sway?
As we know, the viewers of the State of the Union do tend to slant older, and it does tend to be that sort of demographic that tunes in. Last year, as I said, 27 million viewers. That's quite a lot of eyes on it. And we have to think that we're at an inflection point right now. We've just finished Super Tuesday, where Biden and Trump both performed very well. Overwhelmingly well. They both dropped one primary race on Tuesday. And we're now at a point where it's clear that these individuals will overwhelmingly be the nominee for their parties. And we've entered the general election campaign. So those turning in, we're trying to understand what's at stake.
It's very interesting. The viewership for the Super Bowl is 123 million. And the classic argument against politicians is that living in a vacuum, speaking to a bubble, perhaps doesn't allow them to communicate with the real voters. I want to understand from you what happens next with Nikki Haley's voters. She exited this contest with a message for President Trump. It's up to Donald Trump to earn the votes. How important will it be for Donald Trump to change the narrative, to try and embrace the Haley voters? Because Biden has acknowledged that he's naturally a great politician. All great politicians do. They welcome everybody. But how important is it that Haley's voters pivot to Trump?
There's a lot in there in your question. I mean, we can't imagine that former President Trump, is really going to change his message, right? He's been consistent in his approach, in his style, and in his policy approach, in his inconsistency. But we can't imagine that he's going to try to swing towards the middle to recapture what Haley was bringing to the marketplace. She won just a couple of races, but we know that this race is going to come down to a handful of swing states. The margins are not vast here. And on both sides, there is a question overhanging of what, if anything, third-party candidates could do as spoilers. That's not to say we expect Haley to enter the race as the third party, but there are third parties currently running. And because the margins of victory here are going to be so small, there is the potential for that to play spoiler. Biden just this week, again, faced a number of uncommitted votes. So these margins are going to matter when it comes to November.
Right, because we saw her getting a third of voters in some case in these primaries, and Nikki Haley herself declined to endorse Trump. What difference does that make to have Nikki Haley's silence in backing the presumptive GOP nominee?
Well, Nikki Haley stayed in the race, right? Let's remember, because she was well funded. She had stayed in through Super Tuesday because the funding was there, because as she said, it reflected the fact that something like 70% of the polled Americans wanted somebody else on the ballot, and she felt like that person was her. The voters, that have taken the votes that have been cast in the last couple of weeks show that it's not the case, that voters specifically wanted her, despite this ongoing frustration around the rerun of a Biden-Trump presidency. So she stayed in because the money was there, indicating that the interest was there. But she, as you said, she hasn't endorsed Trump, and we'll wait to watch that. She said, she's not angling. She apparently is not angling for an administrative position.
Can we just circle off with what's happening with the Hamas-Israel war, the situation, trying to deliver? Biden orders a military bridge to be built, a port to be built, to try and get aid into Gaza. As you stand back and look at America's actions in the past couple of days, delivering aid by air, ordering this port facility to be built with no Americans on shore, is this America losing control over Netanyahu and changing policy direction?
It's a really big question. So we saw last night in the State of the Union, Biden confronted the ongoing conflict in Israel-Gaza head-on, but he waited till towards the end of his remarks to do so. And what we saw was him attempting to thread this needle, as you're indicating, to provide a balanced assessment of U.S. policy and U.S. views on the ongoing conflict there. So he started very clearly by saying that Israel has a right to go after Hamas, that Hamas could end this war just now if they turned over the hostages and laid down the weapons. But he similarly said we need to get more aid into Gaza to address the ongoing humanitarian crisis for the Palestinian people. And he then went on to say that that they have been tirelessly working for this ceasefire. And, we have this very important date of Ramadan coming on Sunday. It's not a deadline, but certainly many on all sides and certainly in the Biden administration had hoped to see a ceasefire reached before Ramadan. And so instead, now we're hearing perhaps only the sort of developing news that was announced last night in the State of the Union is about this bridge that you mentioned. And the question is whether this is how much we need to make of whether this is a shift in U.S. policy or not. Certainly the U.S. administration is grappling with its frustration around the Netanyahu's government and its approach in Israel. And we will be watching for how many weeks it takes, for example, to even get such a port system up and running.